Is it going to lead to landlords actually caring less about the property?
Landlords are going to be getting stung every which way.
What should I be looking for from my managing agent to effectively manage that relationship with the tenant?
The court system don't even know how they're going to handle all this stuff, basically.
How is discrimination evidence there?
The costs to landlords are going up.
How, under this Act, could I ensure that my property is well looked after and well maintained?
We talk a lot about getting tenants out, but we don't talk about how to best get them in. Buy more and just dominate the market. You're not allowed to prefer the couple.
So Perry, one thing my wife and I have talked about for a while is letting out our property, but I'm slightly concerned about the Renters' Right Act and in particular how I'm able to protect my property, because we'd want to move back in. We'd maybe go away for a year and then come back into the property. How, under this Act, could I ensure that my property is well looked after and well maintained?
Yes, a great question. I think the first answer to that is I strongly believe, and people will in the comments be like, of course you'll say that, but I strongly believe that every landlord now should have a really good managing agent. The self-managing landlords, because they had one property, they could manage it themselves. That was fine, because now it's not so much about the time. You might have the time, but are you really keeping up to speed on the latest legislation, the laws, and all this kind of stuff? So firstly, good managing agent. Ask around friends, local Facebook groups, read reviews online. That's the best way to find a really good property managing agent. Secondary to that, to protect yourself, it's all about, we talk a lot about getting tenants out, but we don't talk about how to best get them in the first place. So it's going to be really strict tenant selection and really strict references. So there's anti-discrimination laws that says you can't discriminate against people with pets, fine. Children receiving housing benefit, fine. But there's nothing to say that you can't, not discriminate, but you can't say no to people that have got poor background adverse credit. And there's a lot of tenants out there at the minute, because of the climate we're in, that's affecting. And it's a real shame, but you need to be really careful of who you first let move into your property. Your managing agent will have a company they use for references. Ours, for example, are absolutely brilliant. They link up to via open banking. They link up to their open HMRC account, because most things are online these days. Obviously, the government's trying to send the world online with like digital IDs and everything now, aren't they? So we can connect to all that to see actually inside their bank to an extent. I mean, the bank won't share everything, but you just want to know that this much comes in each month, that much goes out. A bit more like a mortgage application, which I believe should well be the case as well. It's always been a thing, isn't it, that to get a mortgage, they want to know your inside leg measurement. To rent somewhere, as long as you've got a landlord's reference and you've got a job, happy days. But it shouldn't be like that, because you are, in essence, finding someone to pay your mortgage for you, right? So good tenant referencing, and a good tenant referencing company will have strict criteria of things like they must earn at least 30 times the monthly rent and have to prove that through bank statements and all that kind of stuff. Yes, a landlord can or cannot accept a guarantor. That's landlord's prerogative. If a tenant says, look, a parking ticket, didn't pay it, got a CCJ, it's been settled, but it stays on your credit file for 6 years, I think, after, maybe the landlord then would consider having a guarantor. But that's down to the landlord to choose if they want to do that or not. There's no obligation to say you can't discriminate against somebody who's got bad credit. And personally, I think you need to be very careful, because depending on the circumstances of the bad credit, you want to make sure why they got a CCJ and decide at that point whether you proceed with them as tenants or not. So tenant selection, hugely important. Things like dual household income is really important. When you've got a one-bed flat, if you've got someone on their own who wants to rent it versus a couple, there's no laws to say that you're not allowed to prefer the couple because they're both working, 2 household incomes. If one person loses their job, blah, blah, blah. I mentioned before as well in a previous video that very good landlord rent warranty protection and legal expenses cover is going to be crucial, because the courts are going to be so backlogged. I mean, the court system don't even know how they're going to handle all this stuff, basically. There's been all this talk about we're going to do this from the government, but there's no back-end infrastructure has been changed much to allow for it. So if you have got to evict somebody, it could take 9 months or more for rent arrears, for breach of tenancy, for antisocial behaviour, all this kind of stuff. And at least then your rent protection will pay the rent whilst you're evicting a tenant if they've stopped paying the rent. Side note, do want to say as well that not all tenants want to stay in your property and not move out, but councils are advising tenants to stay. Councils are saying, look, pay your rent, don't stop paying your rent, but just don't move out until the court have evicted you. But then in that situation, even more reason to have rent protection and legal expenses cover, because you won't need to claim on it for rent because you're getting it from the tenant, but it could cost you 5, 6, 7, 8 grand to go through the court process. And those policies will protect. It's like a car insurance policy. You begrudge paying it for 5 years, then a massive smash in your car and you thank God you got car insurance. It's exactly the same situation. And the trouble of all this is that costs to landlords are going up. So our company has had to increase our fees to landlords slightly, very small amount, but to account for all this extra administration and red tape, we have to pass it on to landlords. Rent warranties going up, you know, landlords' costs and mortgages are going up. So that's the other thing, you know, check who is moving into your property, like deeply. Rent protection. Any referencing company that say green light, we think they're a good tenant, we've checked them, we think you should proceed with them, they'll then say, and we're that confident, we'll give you an insurance policy to guarantee they're going to pay the rent, and if they don't, we'll pay it and evict them, blah, blah, blah. The third thing, I guess, is really important as well. Cost of labour and materials has gone through the roof in the last 3 to 5 years, right? Before you let a tenant move in, your property condition and maintenance has to be really scrutinised, because you might think, oh, you know, I'll leave that grouting, I'll leave that masticing, them carpets can wait another couple of years. But actually, the compounded amount of call out here, call out there for this and that and these little jobs, it'll cost £100 for a contractor just to visit a property and to fix a leaky tap. Well, if there's 10 of those throughout the year, it's £1,000. Whereas it might have just been cheaper to spend £700 before the tenant moved in to actually get all that stuff done. So we're being really strict with clients at the minute from a perspective of, you know, you might be all right with that mastic, but it's going to cost you more money in the long run if you do nothing about it.
So let's say I follow your advice. I've got a managing agent that I've got really good reviews on, but I'm not going to be in the area. I'm either going to be in another country. I'm going to be 5, 6 hours away. What should I be looking for from my managing agent to effectively manage that relationship with the tenant? Because a lot of the stuff you've talked about on the channel has been about getting to know your tenants and creating a bit of a personal relationship with them. So what should I be looking for from a managing agent to make sure that comes into fruition? Regular
tenancy inspections. Tenancy inspections are so important, and tenants think they're just there to check up on the tenant, but they're really not. They're equally there to check to make sure the property is good enough for the tenant. So we do property inspections, and you pick up things where tenants are like, oh, do you know what? I didn't want to report that because it's not a big issue. But that can actually compound over time and get a bigger issue, like a little leak, right? We had one recently. Tenant didn't report it. It was only a little leak of the tap. But over 4 months, what the tenant didn't know is that it was leaking down the back of the sink because the mastic was bad, dripping down, and it's got loads of water damage in the flat downstairs. So the inspections are there to protect the investment, is to make sure the tenant's happy, living in it correctly, not subletting. There's no, you know, another thing that people don't realise is that just because there's someone living in the property, the friend's staying there for 3 months, right? Tenant should really tell the managing agent, because the managing agent has got an obligation to the landlord and to the government that everyone living in properties that we manage, they have to have a right to rent check to make sure they're legally allowed to live and rent in the country. And if there's an adult living in a property without that, because the tenant didn't tell the letting agent, they could get in big trouble. The landlord could get in big trouble. So there's, good transparent pricing. So inspections are important, but also really transparent contractor pricing. What we must deal with 15, 20 contractors to manage our portfolio. And we spoke to them all before this law came in. We said, look, landlords are going to be getting stung every which way. Costs are going to be going up. We appreciate your labour's gone up in the last 2 or 3 years. We appreciate the cost of a tile has gone up in the last 2 or 3 years. We need clear, transparent pricing, no matter which one of you guys we call out to do some work on a house. So we had them all agree. So if there's a leaky tap, the landlord knows it would be £100, including VAT, to visit the property and fix it, minus any parts might be needed. If it's a washer, he'll have it on the van. If it's a new tap, it'd be £100, including VAT, plus the cost of the new tap, to keep it nice and cost efficient for the landlords.
That makes sense. Just to pick up on something you said around discrimination. So let's say I put my property on the market, I find a good agent that I'm happy with, I've checked the reviews, and then we get 4 applicants to let the property, and we do the checks, and the banking all looks pretty similar, and the profile of them is all fairly similar, but one of them's got a dog. Say we narrow it down to 2 or 3, but one of them's got a dog. How is discrimination evidence there? Because naturally, if it's a big dog and you've got a really nice house that you're moving back into, if someone said, here's tenant A and tenant B, and the only difference is this one's got a dog, I think nearly every single landlord would pick tenant A without the dog. I would imagine, I might be wrong there, but I would imagine that's the case. Is that discrimination, and what would that process look like? So
I don't really know at this point, but yes, in the eyes of this new law, you're discriminating against the one that's got a dog. Now, realistically, you can only refuse pets or dogs if you've got reasonable reasons, I guess, to do so.
I'm allergic, maybe, and I don't want, I've got really severe allergies.
So we've got one, and it's like an annex in the landlord's garden, and the landlord's got dogs themselves, and they're quite not aggressive dogs, but don't get on too well with other dogs. So that's a good reason, because we want to keep your dog safe. If the dogs get out and have a fight, it's not ideal. So, but that said, though, again, what's going to probably happen is a tenant could not mention the dog, move in, and then ask the next day, I've been thinking of getting a dog who's actually currently at my mum's, and then you can't unreasonably refuse it.
There's a lot of loopholes in it. There's a bit of a loophole theme, isn't there, for renters?
And it's a real shame because, the majority of... I've got 3 dogs myself, right? And I class myself as a pretty reasonable dog owner. But they do things, and they will cause more wear and tear. I've got a British Bulldog, and she's really big, and she doesn't chew anything, but if she's getting old now as well, so if she ends up doing a little piddle on the carpet, that's fine for me because it's my house. If I was a landlord, I'd be like, I don't really want a dog in there.
Yeah.
But then, then what the law would say is it falls back onto the inventory and schedule of condition at the point of moving in. If the dog has caused damage, then the tenant will have to pay for it. But it gets more deeper than that, because let's say the carpet's 5 years old, the Tenancy Deposit Protection Service Adjudication, who would look at would say you can't charge a tenant for that because your carpets need replacing about now anyway. So carpets have got like a shelf life, and you can only apportion damage based on how new the carpets are. If they're brand new carpets, after 2 years, dog's done some mess and damaged them, fine. If they're 5, 6, 7-year-old carpets, you're going to get no contribution to replacing them, because they would look at it that every 5, 6 years you need to put new carpets in anyway. Just like if you dink the walls every 4 or 5 years, as a good landlord, you should be repainting your property anyway. So it's and with this Renters' Rights Act, the tenancy deposit, we're finding when landlord and tenants can't agree on post-move-out deductions, it goes to the adjudication service, and they're really ruling in the tenant's favour as well a lot of the time. And you can't really argue with that. You just got to say, okay, that's the whole point of it. Mm. But again, from protecting yourself as a landlord, but it's more cost to have a third-party schedule of 40-page photographic inventory and schedule of condition costs another 300-400 quid on top. Bearing in mind, I said in the previous video that a tenant could move in after a week, serve notice to move out in 2 months' time. So you've got another cost to update the inventory and schedule of condition with any dinks that tenant's put on the walls while they've lived there. The costs to landlords are going to spiral. And if landlords are struggling now, they're going to be struggling even more in 12 months' time. And that's why I think there'll be more and more going to continue to sell. Mm. And with them not coming into the market, landlords not really buying so much anymore, unless they're really cheap. But anybody that's purchased a property in the last 10 years, if they wanted to, they probably couldn't sell it cheap. Let's say you paid 200 for a property and you're like, I bought it for 190. I'm getting offers now of 180. I can't physically sell it because I owe maybe more than that on the mortgage. So it'd be interesting to see how it comes through.
I guess one concern I have here in this breakdown of the Renters' Right Act is that, is it going to lead to landlords actually caring less about the property? Because if you really care about your property, you have to put lots of measures in place. You have to follow all the advice that you've outlined, which is super sensible, but there's a cost attached to that. And the example I gave you of it being, I wouldn't want to move back into a property that had been severely damaged. But if I just didn't care about the property and I just had it and it was always there to just be a rental property, maybe I actually don't care if the carpet gets damaged. So is it going to lead to landlords actually caring a bit less and just accepting that they get a rough ride?
Could do. They could look at it that it's just a little cash cow anyway. I'll get as much rent as I can for it whilst it's kind of renting, and then refurbish it in a few years' time. That'll fall, I think, on the managing agents to keep a close eye, because it's very important that also good managing agents don't allow landlords to be like that, really. That'd be a conversation to say, John, look, you're probably going to have a $5,000 quote. You either need to get it done or get out of the market. You can't keep renting your property like this. It's going to depreciate. And the other flip side to that is, similar kind of question, but there's many landlords that just physically cannot afford to do the work or to keep on top of the maintenance. But the Renters' Rights Act allows for certain condition laws now as well. So you've got to keep your property in a certain condition. Your boiler's got to be a certain age. They're going to bring in through the next phases of it that your property needs to be an EPC rating of C. You know, some properties now could take 15 grand spent on it to get it to a C. So I still think there's going to be I don't really think the mass exodus has really started yet. I think it was that initial thing of, do you know what, I've only got one property, I'll get out of it. But there'll be landlords with multiple properties now that are thinking, there's two camps: buy more and just dominate the market, or just sell it, be done with it, and go and invest my money in an AI tech company or something like that. Yeah. Because the returns, the capital growth, just aren't there.